You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo, bringing you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. And today we have a special guest. Mark Harrington from Newsday is with us also. Mark writes a lot of the stories about the utilities and water. I think he's got them all. Welcome, Mark. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me on.
I guess we should really start out with kind of an overview. And because I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, we have three players here. We've got National Grid, we've got LIPA, and we've got PSEG. And just so the listening audience, when we bring these characters in to play, so that they and I know how they affect things, maybe you can give us a little overview.
LIPA essentially owns the electric grid on Long Island. That's all the wires, the substations, the transformer, the telephone poles. So that's all LIPA's territory. LIPA's a state authority, and we, as the ratepayers, essentially own that asset. PSEG is a New Jersey company that won a contract in 2014 to start managing that grid for Long Island. So they're the guys that they essentially direct all the guys in the trucks when there's an outage for the daily maintenance, and they have approximately 20 people at LIPA headquarters in Uniondale who effectively manage the system, make decisions about the grid and the budgets and everything else. LIPA directs them. They follow LIPA's directions, and there's a LIPA board that's the oversight of the whole operation. National Grid previously was Keyspan. They were bought in 2007 by National Grid of the UK, in London-based UK. Keyspan was one of the offshoots of the former Long Island Lighting Company, as was LIPA. Keyspan became National Grid. They own all the major power plants on Long Island in Port Jefferson, Island Park, and Northport, plus the smaller plants all around. And they previously managed the system, but after some failures during Superstorm Sandy, LIPA put that contract out to bid. National Grid lost the contract, and PSEG took over. So that's the basic run of how things operate here.
Yep. Appreciate that. Definitely a lot of moving pieces and a lot of, kind of nuanced kind of history there. That obviously you've been reporting pretty much the whole way through. And that's why we wanted to obviously have you on today to talk about the developments with the PSEG LIPA contracts, which are still tentative now, but did break, as you were telling us off air, actually during a family event that you were also dealing with, but had to meet the deadline for that somewhat unexpected announcement that, again, LIPA and PSEG reached a tentative contract settlement that would keep the power service provider in place until at least 2025. So tell us more about that and some of the terms of it. I know a $70 million breach of contract lawsuit and some other LIPA involvings, of course, is what we're going to discuss.
Right. So what happened was Tropical Storm Isaias came along last August, and PSEG said everything was ready. We're in place. Everything is going to work fine. And things just crumbled horribly. More than 500,000 customers lost power, some of them for more than a week. And the real problem was the total breakdown in communication. People couldn't get through. They couldn't get restoration times. Crews were sitting around waiting for work, some people doing nothing. Money wasted. A lot of times they sent crews to places and there was no outage needed. Just waste of time and money, and it was really expensive. It was a $300 million restoration over the week, and the repercussions are still coming. LIPA was furious. LIPA and the trustees just were scathing in their criticism of PSEG over the last 10 months. It was just, I've never seen anything quite like it. Public humiliation of officials, of the job, of even until 2 weeks ago. Just the LIPA board meetings have been must-see television because these guys pulled out all the stops to criticize top officials, essentially calling them liars in some cases, and just unscathing. And then suddenly, last Sunday, to, I think, everyone's surprise, because previously LIPA said it wouldn't even bring back what PSEG had offered in terms of a new contract. They wouldn't even let the board see that because it was so negative, inadequate. Suddenly on Sunday morning, there was a news announcement that just sort of sent heads spinning across Long Island, which was that LIPA had come to terms with PSEG and that they were going to continue with the contract at least until 2025. A new contract that LIPA said, was the best contract in its 22-year history. It got them everything they want, more accountability, more of PSEG's annual $80 million pay at risk if they failed to meet, certain metrics and parameters. They could be denied upwards of $40 million. And with this agreement, LIPA would drop its $70 million breach of contract lawsuit. Just a whole series of things. It's a long list of demands that LIPA wanted: more accountability on Long Island, officials on Long Island are autonomous from New Jersey, all PSEG employees report to Long Island officials, and there's no longer this dichotomy between, or allegiance between, Long Island and New Jersey. So LIPA says it was everything they wanted. They knew that they were moving toward a municipal model, and they were also in the middle of reviewing the potential contract with other service providers. Apparently, there was high interest from other service providers to take over from PSEG, because LIPA had effectively, and in fact had sent PSEG revealed last week, LIPA had sent PSEG a letter terminating them in February. PSEG essentially refused to acknowledge it and said it wanted to keep the contract and would defend itself vigorously. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes discussion of what happened. Like, I can tell you that lawmakers on Long Island were livid. Many of them were expecting that this was moving toward a fully public model, which would save ratepayers $80 million a year, give Long Island more autonomy over its utility, the ability, accountability, transparency to see what was really going on, potentially an elected board as opposed to a state-appointed board. So the governor essentially controls LIPA, 5 board members, and those guys. I think that they're independent, but they do, they'll still see what are the best things for LIPA to do. And so the sense is now that with some conditions that they may go along with that. So the governor is alleged to have been behind the scenes here in negotiating this contract. And so we haven't really got a lot of confirmation on exactly what happened. I can just tell you that activist groups and lawmakers are fit to be tied. They're threatening hearings. They're threatening all kinds of things to get to the bottom of just what happened and why LIPA is no longer examining either, finding a better service provider, or what many of them seem to want, a fully municipal utility that has total control of itself. So,
all right, Bill, whenever you're ready.
Okay, there's 2 things that popped out to me about. They made a deal and everybody's got crazy about it. I'm not a big fan of secret. How many factions are involved in, or would be involved in, coming to some kind of agreement? I wonder if the secrecy was necessary for them to actually agree on something.
Yeah, I'll tell you that the negotiations, from what I understood, for months had been going very poorly. LIPA versus PSEG, but all the while the state had been sort of quietly involved. And to my understanding, the state was continually sort of forcing the parties to get back to come to an agreement. Now, the speculation is that this is the Governor Andrew Cuomo was the one who essentially authored the LIPA Reform Act that gave PSEG a much greater role in managing the system than National Grid had previously had. So he put all of his money onto PSEG, and for years they seemed to be doing improving service over National Grid. So the governor had, something of a pony in the race here by encouraging LIPA to make a deal with PSEG. So, I mean, there's a lot of, rumors around about what happened at the last minute, but I'll tell you that the pretty good sources had told me that, the state was almost acting as a lobbyist for PS, forcing LIPA to do this deal. And the LIPA, and, I think LIPA was very open to all options. They made almost, abundantly clear that the superior option was a fully municipal utility. I mean, people like Tom Falcone, very, very qualified guy. I mean, very smart. He could easily have been the CEO of a fully municipal LIPA. He's just a very sharp guy. And I think everyone was kind of looking forward to that. And then suddenly things just took this turn. So I think that there may have been encouragement by the state, including people say Governor Cuomo's involvement with the very highest levels of PSEG corporate over the weekend. And there may have been like an ultimatum, allegedly, and PSEG or LIPA ultimately said, this is what we want. The company said, okay, we'll do it. And suddenly there was a deal. So the timing was very surprising. Even the settlement, LIPA had asked for $70 million. They got upwards of $30 million. Some of it includes money that people have already gotten, including the $6.9 million in reimbursements during the storm. PSEG will forego a bonus that they could have gotten last year, $3.5 million or so for hitting all, most of the metrics in performance. So the money that LIPA is getting, some of it's cash, some will definitely benefit ratepayers, but it's not the $70 million that they asked for, given the high costs that customers are enduring and will continue to endure to get the system back up to speed. I mean, it's going to cost $3 million. It's costing $3 million a month now to get things right. And it's an old system that LIPA just last week criticized as being outdated and the hardware is antiquated. So it's all very surprising.
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
But LIPA had a case against PSEG, and if the case went their way, they may have gotten $70 million. Now they've got a sure $30 million.
Right. Well, I guess that's the nature of a settlement. You figure, what are the odds of you getting the full amount? What are the odds of, is it better to get a settlement and move forward? Did LIPA always really want to just get a better deal from PSEG, and was the whole thing just a negotiating tactic? Either way, what LIPA says is that we couldn't have asked for a better contract, that their levels of accountability are higher than ever before, and ratepayers could get money back if PSEG fails. The only problem is that LIPA has been telling us what an awful company management-wise, what an awful structure we've got here, everything. So we're kind of stuck with, well, you just said last week that these guys are awful. How could this be the best deal we've ever gotten? So I think everyone's head is still spinning, including mine. I was not expecting this.
Yeah, no, and you're the one who's been covering it so intimately, and certainly the activists, like you said, the lawmakers, everyone, like you said, just is a bit confused about this outcome. What do you think are maybe those roadblocks that really do stop it from becoming a public utility company? I guess that you see. What was pointed out is, this is why we couldn't do it now versus, maybe we'll still consider it down the line, given all those longstanding complaints about, the private control of it.
I have to tell you that on balance, as the last time they did this in 2012, they did a study just like this. And on balance, the pros far outweigh the cons. I mean, the pure savings. I mean, when you bring in a service provider, they have a profit motive. So that's $80 million that we pay, plus other services. I mean, PSEG has other contracts beside the management contract. So I think LIPA said it's upwards of $120 million, including affiliated services that they do. So a lot of that would be taken in-house. I mean, LIPA, the only real risk I think that LIPA said was their ability to get, staff up with a full management team to run all aspects of the business. But I'll tell you that LIPA has a lot of very qualified people, and it looks like they have been hiring. They used to be as low as 40 employees. They're now up to 65, including a brand new, highly qualified vice president for transmission and distribution. They have a lot of utility experience in-house, some people who have been there since the Lilco days. Ken Kane, a very qualified guy, had been, working on finance now, oversight. Rick Shansky, some really qualified people there. So I felt like they were kind of staffing up to do this. Tom Falcone, obviously very, very qualified guy. And suddenly they just walked away from it. So what they said in the past, can we staff up this quickly? There's some risk involved there, but I'll tell you, it's the same risk that you incur when you get a new service provider. I mean, say, for instance, they had Con Ed do it, would Con Ed be able to get as many qualified people on staff that quickly? Because, it could happen. I think LIPA said this. LIPA had told PSEG the contract was going to be expired in their termination note by April of 2022. So LIPA would have essentially a year to pull it all together. I think they could have done it. I think that there was a high level of confidence among lawmakers and activists, including the Long Island Progressive Coalition and their affiliates, who were very, very supportive to make this happen. There was, support from local universities who could help become, a base of knowledge for them. A lot of very qualified, professors and think groups, think tanks all across Long Island, who I think would be willing to help and very motivated. But that ain't going to happen. So right now, it's the way it is right now. LIPA is expected to vote on a contract that's being formulated sometime in mid to late August. There'll be a special meeting of the board, from what I heard. And I don't think there's going to be public hearings right now. There's no plan for that. I think that there should be, because if there isn't by LIPA, there will be by lawmakers locally who are just completely motivated to get to the bottom of this, and if, with any luck, have to make some kind of a change here.
Fascinating.
Do you think that a big part of this is that they actually stopped the automatic renewal of the contract? I mean, that was one of the parts of the.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so right now the way it was, the contract is formally ended in 2025, but there was an almost automatic 8-year extension. So PSEG could, it was essentially, it looked like a 20-year contract is what they had gotten. So one of the things that they did negotiate is to end that automatic extension. I think that I'm not sure, they haven't told us what the terms are yet, but LIPA has indicated that they can come to a full stop by 2025, and by that time maybe they'll have either got a sense of whether PSEG is qualified or whether they're able to go ahead and do it on their own. So maybe they're buying time here. I don't know. I'll tell you, if there's another experience like Isaias or Sandy, we're in real trouble. One of the things I suggested to people was just to prepare, because if you take LIPA at its word, this company and this computer system that runs the outages is not prepared. That's what they told us. It's antiquated. We need better. So my advice to people listening was just be ready. I mean, if you can get, generators, batteries, because we just don't know. I mean, LIPA is a pretty sharp bunch of people. They told everybody their company's not ready. PSEG, on the other hand, and to their credit, they have spent a lot of time and a lot of money trying to get this cured, as they said, and they have said the problems are solved. There's only some minor things still happening, and that they're more prepared than ever to handle a big storm. So we'll take them at their word and see what happens. I think it's anybody's guess at this point.
Of course, and maybe just to somewhat finish or continue on the issue of the public takeover. Do you think, or is it kind of discussed that one of the concerns on why this doesn't actually ever materialize, and that it kind of is a bit of not a dog and pony show, but that we have all this yelling at the agency, but when a tropical storm or something happens, it's easy to put the blame on this external kind of entity, versus if it was internal and then they bungled the disaster response, it kind of falls back on all the folks who called for it and the legislators as well. So I don't know. Do you think that plays into this calculation, maybe to be cynical, Mark, or do you think that that's still something that they would like to kind of deal with after the fact? That they made it public.
I think you're exactly right. I think that there is. Anytime, as in the last storm, the governor called out Con Ed. They've been hit with a fine of over $100 million. They called out. Yep. Altice also hit with a pretty big fine for failures during the storm. So the governor can very easily, when it's a public company like that or is an outside entity as opposed to the state-run agency, the governor can very easily point to an outside company, threaten to fire them, threaten to revoke their franchise agreement, and stir up the newspapers to report a lot of things. But in the end, is there a lot of change, or is there, there's penalties, there's promises to reform, but LIPA has been hit with, severe, during the National Grid days, sanctions, all kinds of, threats and promises. National Grid got bumped, and still the underlying systems that were supposed to, or that are supposed to, help us during a storm just didn't work. So having someone to scream at is great, but change is the real order of the day. And I think there was enough people who were motivated with a fully municipal LIPA to say, hey, you know what, we're all going to work toward this. This is a Long Island issue. It's not a state issue. Let's make Long Island maybe even a county authority, where Suffolk County and Nassau County each get 5 board members, and that's how you run it, versus having it run out of Albany, where people are not necessarily motivated by, hey, look at all this food I've wasted. Look, I've been out for a week. Lives are endangered. That's one of the things that happened with this tropical storm. Old people, home during a heat wave for a week without power. It's just amazing that no one died, as far as we know, during that storm. And people on critical care customers. The lists for that, where you're supposed to be helping these customers, were all outdated. And something like a third of them never got a phone call. It was just really from top to bottom. It was such an eye-opening experience. And you thought, let's reform, let's change. But that doesn't.
If not now, when? Exactly.
Right. And LIPA, by the way, had a list of dozens of demands, a to-do list to PSEG, and as of last week, at the board meeting, board members were essentially eviscerating PSEG for not completing the list. PSEG had defenses to say these were not all related to the storm, et cetera. But to have board members, a very conservative group out there, sort of going after PSEG about a to-do list nearly a year after the storm was very, very surprising.
Yeah, like you said, to a lot of people, it certainly has been. So I guess just to maybe finish that, though, in terms of that public power. So does that mean that, again, if this goes through, which it sounds like there's a good likelihood that it does, this contract agreement with, maybe there being some public hearings, but not really having a lot of direct impact on the ultimate outcome besides public pressure, which there already have been a ton of, does it seem, again, that then there's no chance of it even being a possibility until the end of this contract? Is that how it works? Or is there any way to potentially void a contract if, let's say, they really do bungle another, Sandy style kind of disaster?
Well, I'll tell you this. If there's another Sandy style response to the next tropical storm, and by the way, we've already got, there's one on the way, and it's supposed to be a highly active storm season. So it's a big risk that I think LIPA is taking, because in this case, they are going to be responsible for any failures. It's not going to be PSEG. It's going to be, hey, you guys said let's move ahead with this new contract. So LIPA will be on the chopping block here if it turns out that things really do go wrong. Again, PSEG assures us if things are improved, they're fixed, and everything is okay. So we'll take them at their word. But sort of where it goes from here, I don't hear a lot of discussion. Like the idea of protests or people out there, with petitions or right now there's no public hearings to talk about this contract. It looks like you have about a month and a half to go. It looks like they're just writing up the language for the contract, and that's the way this is going. So, unless I've heard no stirrings, just sort of anger on the part of lawmakers, but I've heard no stirrings of, hey, we're going to put something together immediately to try and to change this. So it looks like this is the way it's going.
Okay.
Mark, do you see any of this as merely maneuvering for position for eventually a municipal electric, in other words?
Right. I know.
I don't know.
I do think that is going to be both the sledgehammer held out over this whole thing. If something goes wrong, they're going to either move to a new service provider very quickly or move to a municipal entity, which is it should be almost as simple to do. I mean, it's essentially just carrying over all the PSEG employees from an outside entity that's already formed. So whoever takes it over essentially just moves into the box of, it's called Servco, and manages all this 2,500 employee workforce, the telephone call, telephone answers, repair people who, mid-level managers. They essentially will just take over Servco. Either it's an outside company or it's LIPA itself. So I think there's kind of a tee up there for that to happen. It probably will happen sooner if there's a big, catastrophe locally. If PSEG does the work well, I think we'll just sort of move along here. So let's keep your fingers crossed that there's not really a big storm, because I think that will that'll be sort of the metal hitting the road here, the rubber hitting the road.
And it's a heck of a way to decide things, right?
Yep. No, certainly, definitely. Nobody wants any more natural disasters and flooding. Just maybe segue towards another topic, that I know you've also been covering. But I'm just trying to see, in terms. Well, I'll just say that again. Obviously, like you said, that there's still a lot more to come, and there may be public hearings. Obviously, the pressure will be put on lawmakers, which do seem receptive to it, by progressive activist groups. Whether it's Long Island progressives or environmental advocacy organizations or DSA and political kind of organizations. We'll see what comes of that. Before the actual hearing or before the actual agreement is potentially met. But I know you also wrote about some other things that are related to PSEG in terms of, some other scandals and kickbacks, and hopefully we'll have a time to just touch on that in a moment. But I wanted to discuss another piece you did just write recently, which was regarding the utility shutoff moratorium coming to an end, and there being basically money on the table for people who are overburdened with their arrears from not being able to pay their utility bills, and that money not being taken. So can you lay it out for listeners, what's going on there and how maybe they can, benefit from those programs that aren't being utilized effectively? Yeah,
well, I'll tell you, and it's in this case, it applies not only to PSEG and your electric bill, but it also applies to your gas bill. That's National Grid, the cable company, which is Altice for most people, Verizon for others. It applies to your water company, broadband, internet service, and cable TV and telephone. What happened was there was a state moratorium on shutoffs. If you simply called your utility, called them up and called the customer service line and said, just a test, it's calling, self-certification. There's no background check. There's no way to do it. If you simply call them up and said, I'm having a hardship paying my bill, and that's why I'm in arrears, or even if you're not in arrears, but you think you might be because you have a COVID-related hardship, they are obligated under the law, a law that was passed in May, to extend the grace period on that would prevent you from being shut off through December 21st of this year. What happened was, so that was in existence anyway. If you simply called them at any point and said that, you were protected from, 180 days from the end of the grace period. It actually could have extended until next July. But what happened was the governor last month, ended the state of emergency. So the 180-day trigger period has begun. So if you are in arrears, if a customer is in arrears on their bill of any of those utilities, what you must do, especially if you've been impacted by COVID, or if you might be impacted by COVID, you must call your utility and request that grace period. Otherwise, the utility can begin shutoffs. For PSEG Long Island, this is the one that I did get, there were, at the end of May, something like 186,000 residential customers who were behind on their electric bills, and potentially a good number of them because of COVID-related impacts. But what we found in our reporting was that only 184 people, as of the end of May, had actually called to attest and to get that protection. So what that means is if you can't pay your bill, PSEG can start the process of shutting you off for non-payment. But the state legislators, Senator Kaminsky, Senator Gorin, Assemblyman Thiel, Engelbrecht, they passed this law that says let's build this protection into people, for people to be protected through the end of the year because COVID still is having an impact. So for PSEG, I can tell you the number is 1-800-490-0025. That's the number to call ASAP to get that moratorium continued through December 21st. Everyone is, I think there probably was not a lot of education about this. The moratorium was automatic anyway. It had been in place. So people were not going to be aggressively shut off until the state of emergency was over. But things changed this week. I mean, as of Monday of this past week, the utility could begin to do shutoffs. Not that they were, not that I've heard reports of people getting shut off. So it's just really imperative to get the word out to people that if you are facing a hardship, for whatever reason, again, related to COVID is what they say, but to call the utility and just attest, say, I would like to attest to a COVID-related impact. That's why I can't pay my bill, and I'd like to have that grace period of probably about 170 days.
Exactly. But just that number again was 1-800-490-0025.
For PSEG, correct?
I believe that's correct. That's right.
Okay,
great. Yep, definitely. That's a very, very important piece of information that we certainly encourage all our listeners to share. And even if you apply and you're ineligible, there will be no repercussion, of course, to your account. So certainly, it's a good thing for anyone who might be in that position to certainly consider. There is still some other things like the Emergency Rental Assistance Program and other pandemic kind of relief benefit programs that certainly, we continue to promote, kind of the information for, and we'll share that out on social media as well. So thanks, Mark. That's obviously very, very important, because certainly we're talking about all this money in terms of contracts and money that, goes into these large, companies, but the ratepayers themselves, certainly during this last year have been in tough times themselves. And if there's something that might make it a little easier, I think we all know that's definitely a good thing that everyone can support. So,
right.
Okay.
If I could just say one thing again, it's important to stress that it's not just as you might think the electric company. So Altice, I think that they generally are not regulated by the PSC. I mean, parts of what they do are, but in this case, the lawmakers built in these protections for all types of utilities. Again, water, gas. So if you're an Altice customer and you're having problems paying your bill, make sure you call them and get that protection built in so they can't shut you off. Because these days, broadband is an essential service for a lot of people. It's their communication. And the other thing that I just wanted to stress is that the State Department of Public Service has a web page, and if you Google it, New York DPS, you'll come to that page. If you do not get satisfaction from your utility in terms of being able to attest for those for the COVID grace period, call the Department of Public Service or write them. There's a complaint line on their web page, and complain about your utility if they do not help you set up and get this grace period. This is very essential right now, and then they'll file a complaint with the individual utilities and force them to. So
definitely.
Two essential things to do.
That's important to know, and especially if you experience that type of issue, or even if you have some questions and you're just kind of confused about how to go about any of it, you can always reach out to your local elected officials' offices. They certainly have constituent services staff that should be able to help you kind of navigate any of these applications, or again, clarify, or reach out to any agencies like the PSC if you are met with a circumstance that you believe might be, problematic and, potentially, like Mark just said, kind of not considerate of all the realities that, again, are present. So, okay, that's important, and maybe that's a way to segue into what I did just reference a little while ago, some of the reporting you had done on some money that was going to, I guess, employees from National Grid in a kickback kind of now investigation that seems to have been scaled up and is being looked at, I think, at the state level at this point. So can you tell our listeners what kind of, I guess, those facts are and, what your reporting has found on that?
Right. So this was another kind of a surprise. It happened on a middle of the week. There was the U.S. Attorney's Office, prosecutors in Brooklyn, put out an announcement saying that a utility company that they did not identify, they were alleging that 5 employees of this utility company had been involved in a nearly 10-year kickback scheme with a unnamed large contractor on Long Island, whereby these employees were receiving, managers who were able to influence contracts for these outside vendors were receiving, essentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in kickbacks and bribes to give these contractors, very lucrative contracts, things like tuition for their children. They said more than one RV, so those things are pretty. Anyway, home improvement, yep. And at one point, for one of the fellows, they even went to his safety deposit box and uncovered $300,000 in cash, which they allege is part of the payoff scheme. We asked around. We were able to identify the 5 people as all being National Grid employees. National Grid subsequently confirmed it for us that they were the company and that they were cracking down on this, participating and cooperating with the ongoing investigation, and that this does not represent the ethics and values of National Grid customers. But the fact that it was going on for so long, and the fact that it was one of the things about that story that has yet to be told is that in some cases these were facilities that were used by PSEG Long Island for LIPA. So they have they have lease agreements where, the trucks and the equipment that they use to service the region are all National Grid owned. They got them in the LOCO deal. They're National Grid owned, but PSEG leases them. In some cases, PSEG uses these same contractors to clean facilities, to remove snow from facilities and other things. So it's also LIPA PSEG ratepayers who were impacted by this. So we have yet to find out exactly what the numbers are, but we're still waiting to find out what those numbers are. But in any case, it's a pretty big deal. I think a lot more to be uncovered. I know who some of the contractors are. We're still putting together information about that. But big shock to a lot of ratepayers already paying high rates.
I mean, insult to injury, like I said, with everything going on and the discussion of kind of still not meeting some of the terms that wanted to be met for preparations for new storms and all the other things that you've obviously reported and discussed. Then to see things like this come out, right before. Again, obviously, it's not directly related to PSEG in the sense of those employees, but as you just kind of had referenced, that the connections to Long Island are certainly evident. So that is crazy to see that. Yeah,
I think it's interesting that one of your points was the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers was saying that their membership could have done most of those things that they farmed out in the first place. And probably more economically if you had in some cases, like during a snowstorm, there's not a power outage, but you have people in house. They're all, being paid, and they're sitting around waiting for a call. They probably could have operated the snowplow trucks. There are cheaper ways to do this. So I've just heard from a number of people that there was, varying levels of outrage there, and they've been fighting for years to try and get some of these maintenance workers, the jobs refilled. They've been lost through attrition over the years. So they have made a push up to upper management to say, hey, look, why are we using these contractors? I have heard that the contractors, the contracts are no longer in place. However, it's like the companies are not really speaking to us. There's not really a lot of information that's out there confirmed right now. Right. Well, it'll be interesting to see your follow-up. Could be more to come. The contractors. The state has launched an investigation itself that's independent of the federal investigation. The FBI is involved, and there could be tax implications. Again, all these people, these are only allegations. The people have. I'm not sure if they've pled yet, but
allegations, but still the implications could be pretty wide-ranging here on Long Island.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly. So yeah, that's a great tease, and obviously all the more reason to subscribe to Newsday and to follow Mark's reporting.
We'll be watching for your follow-up on. I'm very interested to see what you uncover as far as what's going on with the utilities.
Of course.
Okay. Well, Thank you very much. A real pleasure to be here. Thanks for all your interest.
Yep.
Well, we got to promise. So you got to promise us you'll come back.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
Great.
Look forward to it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and summer till then. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mark. Happy 4th of July.
Enjoy the 4th, guys. Thanks.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
All righty, Bill. So had some tech issues there to kind of have to, traverse, but I think we hopefully semi nailed the dismount. That's debatable, but either way, that was a nice, kind of long form interview about all that's going on with PSEG and the contract and those issues, a long-standing story on Long Island. But now we're very lucky to be joined as well by another New York-based reporter, Ellen Killoran, with crimeonline.com. And certainly she's been following the Giglo Beach investigations for a long time, as many Long Islanders have, and now even, nationwide folks who, are kind of just interested in what exactly in the world is going on with this case. She joins us now to break down some of the latest. There had been a press conference by State Senator Boyle, who I did reference before, and that kind of made a lot of news on the calls for another increased level of investigation by the Attorney General's office, and she'll lay this all out right now. So thank you so much, Ellen.
Hello, Ellen. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Bill. Hi. Thanks. Hi, Sean. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Certainly. Thanks for making this happen kind of a little bit kind of shoestring last minute. Always appreciate that. I know there's a lot to this story, and I know, like you said, you've been covering it for a long time. So certainly an authority on a lot of the facts and, also the noise that kind of comes around the facts, of this case. But could you maybe just lay out for our listeners, just maybe about a 2-minute, just kind of overcap for maybe people who kind of know of the story, but don't really know what the actual kind of timeline facts are involved?
Sure thing. This is an investigation that goes back over a decade. The bodies were first found near Giglo Beach. The first 4 bodies were found in 2010 while police were searching for another missing woman who had gone missing in Oak Beach. The discovery of those first 4 bodies, known as the Giglo 4 young women, led to an expanded search of the area. More bodies were found, more body parts were found. Investigators believe at least 10 people have been killed by the Long Island serial killer. That number could very easily be into the teens. The investigation was very active, or very publicly active in the beginning. The first 2 years, it was something that was on the news all the time. Police were speaking to the media, they were speaking to the public, they were speaking to the families. But as these things do, no suspect was ever identified, no killer was found, and the investigation got pretty quiet for a while. What happened earlier this week was Senator Phil Boyle held a press conference, and he announced during this press conference that he had contacted the Attorney General's office, and he's asking her to assign a special prosecutor to the case because he believes that there has not been enough movement on this case. And he also specifically pointed out that it was over a year ago now, about a year and a half exactly, that Suffolk County Police Department did release one piece of evidence, something that had not happened in the first 10 years of this investigation. They showed the public an image of a belt that was found at one of the crime scenes that they believe belongs to the killer and not a victim. Mm-hmm. At that time, the Suffolk County Police Department said that there was going to be more coming soon, and it hasn't. So Senator Boyle has decided that he wants to put some pressure on, get a special prosecutor assigned to look at the investigation into the investigation. He wants to know what was going on inside the Suffolk County Police Department during those first early years and months of the investigation when James Burke was the chief of police, someone who has since been to jail.
Mm-hmm. No, that is a good laying out of the facts overall, and obviously up into this most recent press conference, which, like you said, kind of pulled back, at this case. And like you said, is calling for, am I right? Especially, like you said, that kind of very beginning period, right? Which the former police commissioner Burke was so intimately involved, prior to his kind of prosecution. That's what Senator Boyle most focused on, right?
Exactly right. Yes. He wants to know why James Burke was permitted to continue as chief of police during the crucial stages of this investigation, when James Burke called off the FBI. The Suffolk County Police Department had the ability, as is very common in these cases, to get assistance, particularly forensic profiling from the FBI. And James Burke said no. And Senator Boyle wants to know why James Burke remained in that position for as long as he did after making that decision.
Yeah, that is a fair question that I know
it's a good question. Yeah, it's a very good question.
Are having, and certainly, like you said, wow, it's amazing to think how long this case has been going on, and certainly, yeah, it's a lot different then than now. But I guess he's the main part of this story. Burke, of course, and I guess maybe we'll go there first, and then we'll go back to kind of the political and kind of police handling of it in the present. But what, I guess, in your experience, having covered this, what do you hear, and like, how do you deal with all this kind of external speculation about potential involvement of that former police commissioner, now disgraced, with the actual facts as they are known? How do you manage that? Because I know it's a tough thing for us sometimes to talk about, because there's so much noise in the space about.
For sure. Well, I think one thing that is easy about being a reporter is that you learn very quickly what is a fact and what is speculation. Yeah. We have to stick to the facts. So I feel that my position sort of benefits me in the sense that I don't get pulled into the muck so much on this, because I know what I have to stick to, and I know what's true and what's not true. And I know that James Burke went to jail. I mean, he is someone with a criminal history. So we know that, but we certainly don't have the police don't have any evidence that I know of that ties him directly to any of these killings.
Yeah, no, that's essential, of course. And that's obviously what we always stress. And like I said, thankfully, journalistic integrity helps, kind of get through all that kind of potential mud. But what about for politicians, because they're the ones who are dealing with the public kind of response to it, who might not always be dealing in fact, but sometimes how people feel about these, very visceral cases, where it certainly is, very devastating to the individual's families, but also to the larger community that's involved.
Of course. Well, I'll share this with you. I recently spoke to Senator Boyle, and we have a video interview of that conversation. And I think that he speaks to this very point that you're making. The politicians have a different kind of responsibility to their constituents than a reporter would. And he has said that he feels that he wants the community, not just the families of the victims. He wants the community at large to feel more comfortable and secure in their police department. And that's why he says that he's calling for more transparency, because this situation has indeed cast some doubt on the inner workings of this police force. And that's something that I've heard from just about every single person who I've interviewed about this case.
Yeah. And, we've talked to county executives, and we've talked to a lot of the electeds and Nassau County's police commissioner in terms of a lot of the other concerns when it comes to other matters that they're, kind of having to navigate in terms of, racial equity and hiring practices, in terms of a lot of the kind of police reform conversations that are out there, in any kind of law enforcement kind of environment during the present kind of, times. But certainly, like you said, it's an interesting situation, for, I guess, the AG to consider. But am I correct that is there no response from their office at the AG right now, or did they respond negatively?
Senator Boyle said yesterday that there has been a response. I have not seen or heard directly what is said in that response, but he says that he believes that things are moving forward. The question right now is whether or not the Attorney General's office absolutely needs this to be referred from someone like the DA, for example, and whether or not they're going to be able to get that referral if it is required to go ahead.
I see. Interesting. Bill, what are your thoughts? I guess having this and having been a Long Islander the whole time through,
Well, I was curious. Just the latest thing was the commissioner from Suffolk County resigned recently. Do you think that had anything to do with this at all? I mean, it's a speculative question, I know.
Yeah, I don't have any information about that. I actually was unable to ever get an interview with Commissioner Geraldine Hart, despite wanting to. And I that's even more unfortunate now that she's out of her position. Geraldine Hart was the person who was the face of the release of this website and the new evidence. And when she spoke to the media, and it was very encouraging, someone who has previously been with the FBI, new to the department, fresh eyes are always good. And so it seemed as though she was pretty much taking over the investigation in cooperation, of course, with District Attorney Sini, who was previously the police commissioner. So there was a moment that I believe others who have followed this case very closely thought, okay, maybe we're moving. And there was a little bit of movement, but she said in January 2020 that investigators were going to release more information and more evidence, and that it never happened. What they did do was they identified another victim. Valerie Mack was identified last year, May of last year, someone who was from Philadelphia and who died, I believe, in 2000. So that's how far back this goes.
Yeah.
To your question specifically, Bill, I don't have any idea why she resigned, but I was surprised.
But I mean, it kind of shows, well, maybe it doesn't really, but the appearance is that there's a schism between the commissioner's office and the police department proper. If here she's saying, and we're all thinking the same thing, fresh eyes, good, and she comes out and almost promises some new stuff, and then all of a sudden none of that happens. And then we hear she's resigning and leaving. Well, did she get a look at the show that was going on there and just said,
there was a lot on her plate. And like we said, police reform and other things that she won't have to be dealing with so directly.
Well, that's for sure.
Head of Hofstra's law enforcement agency that she would have at the helm of Suffolk County, of course. So, I hear your perspective, Bill. And I think, that's the reality of what people, they see the appearance of things. They don't always see the reality of things. And
we've talked about this a lot, John, that, in my generation, when I was growing up, lawmakers, municipalities, if it looked bad, don't do it. That was the rule. Yeah. Now that seems to have way gone out the window, and nobody cares what it looks like.
Well, that's a whole other story. But I mean, in this case, it's maybe more the omission, instead of, kind of, like I said, again, but she was obviously at the front, like Ellen just said, kind of
she was right in
charge. But that's a whole nother story. I think that, like you said, we really can't go too far into it at the moment, but maybe just to wrap, Ellen, what maybe is kind of related to what you just raised in terms of the fresh eyes and the new kind of outlook on this case, and maybe these types of crimes in general, I'll say, that I kind of had, referenced to you, previously off air, was in terms of how people see, and I know not everyone potentially involved in this case was potentially a sex worker, but in terms of, kind of evolving perceptions and even legal rights for sex workers, how do you think that might shape maybe cases like this that, I know, again, I don't want to go into generalizations, but in the past, if a case was, let's say, just for an example, a John Benet Ramsey case, where it's this kind of public, outrage because of just this, oh my goodness, kind of randomness seeming of it versus someone who was perceived, again, not to put any blight or anything, but publicly, this idea of people who are maybe on the certain fringes of society, how do you think that might change, hopefully for survivors or for, victims advocates on these types of cases from, your reporting, or have you seen?
I think we're already seeing the necessary change that's coming to you, but it is happening. And in the very beginning of this investigation, the kind of questions that you're raising were very big questions in terms of how much attention was given to this investigation? Was it enough? And was their bias. And I don't think you have to look too closely to see that there was some evidence of bias, whether it's unconscious or not. These women who were found dead, they had been reported missing. And there's a piece of evidence that was missed because I believe, this is just my opinion, I believe that those disappearances were not taken as seriously as they could have been. The person the likely killer of Melissa Bartholomew, called her sister from her phone multiple times, said horribly violent things to this minor juvenile girl.
My God.
He made the calls from Midtown Manhattan. So obviously this person knew a little bit about what he was doing. That makes it a much harder to track a cell phone signal when it's in this kind of congestion, I believe it was Midtown. I could be wrong. Midtown probably at rush hour.
Well, either way, of course. Mm-hmm.
But it was extremely difficult to track this person, but was it impossible? And would it have been more possible if the victims' jobs had not been what they were? But like I said in the beginning, we are seeing an evolution nationally, outside of the crime sphere, about how we look at sex work and look at people who do sex work. And I think that's very encouraging in a lot of ways, but I think it's particularly encouraging in cases like this. Maybe the changing dialogue around sex work, maybe that might change the mind of someone who still has sort of the Joel Rifkin mindset of, I'm going to target a sex worker because I know no one's looking for her. That's not true. That wasn't true in the case of the Gilgo 4, and that's not true for anyone today. You can't make a claim like that. And I just think that the more we change the dialogue and show respect for everyone, I think the easier it's going to be to not only solve crimes like this, but prevent them.
That is essential to understand, and that is so important. And I think that's a great way to leave it there, Ellen, with those strong, kind of messages, like you said, of hopefully changing times leading to better outcomes. In these cases for people who have already gone through so much. These families, and like you said, every life is important. And thank
Ellen, as we do normally with, and this is your first time on the show, but we want to get you to promise to come back because we know you'll still be working on this, and
Absolutely.
I don't think they're going to wrap it up anytime soon. Not this week for sure.
Doesn't seem like
so.
Not this week.
We hope to see you again real soon, and you can tune us into what you've uncovered.
Great. It'd be my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ellen. And just a reminder, of course, you can follow her work at crimeonline.com and on social media. Makes it nice and simple at Ellen Killoran, Killoran on Twitter, and I'm sure some other platforms. So thank you so much.
John, good work. Thank you very much. And folks, we'll see you next time, same place on 90.3 WHPC.